Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Maqbool with you at PTV World. In today's show, we will be taking a look at two important stories. The first is in reference to the economic situation of the country and of course something that Pakistan is struggling with. We're in the middle of June and unfortunately there's very little time left till the bailout program with the IMF expires on the 30th of June. And in the ways that we have seen the negotiations progress, it seems that the possibility of us being able to secure even the 9th review seems to be diminishing. However, the Finance Minister Aqdas speaking today talked about how the talks with the IMF are yet not failed, and this is something that is still underway and the negotiations are still not complete. At the same time, we also know that a number of issues have been raised with regards to the budget for the next fiscal year that has earlier been announced by the government, and the IMF has spoken about particularly the issues with regards to broadening the tax base and has talked about a tax amnesty scheme which is not in line with the IMF's conditionality. This is something that of course we've heard in the past as well, coming in from the political leadership and the finance ministry, that all obligations and requirements of the IMF have already been met. And this is especially important when we take a look of the situation in terms of where we stand today and the amount of time that is left. Unfortunately, we also know that moving forward, this is something that is going to be a part of the discussion till the passage of the budget, but the IMF has also categorically stated that there is only time for one board meeting to be held. Whether or not we will be able to secure the 9th review is still something that remains to be seen. But in the aftermath of these objections being raised, we also heard from the finance minister with regards to the issues flagged by the IMF that this is something that they are in negotiations with, that this is something that Pakistan is going to consider, but it is there is a lot of ways that the country would like to progress further and proceed further as a sovereign state. It should be able to do that and be able to decide where they want to put in more taxes, where they want to collect in more revenue, and how they want to proceed further. Of course, with regards to where the country is currently standing and what the situation is, it is a question mark as to whether or not Pakistan is in a position to even be able to afford that and to make these choices. And moving forward, if we are not able to secure this program, what other choices are left for Pakistan and what can possibly happen with regards to the objections that have been flagged by the IMF? Can there be something that can be done regarding this, especially in the time that has been left, because the IMF has stated that it's going to continue to support and work with the country with regards to this negotiation. So if it remains to be seen what exactly is going to happen. But with regards to the conversation around defaulters, the finance minister has spoken about how this is something that he has spoken about before as well, and it is the geopolitical situation that is impacting the country's dynamics, and there are countries involved which want to see Pakistan and its downfall, and this is important especially in terms of the impact that it's having on the IMF negotiations, as well of course the parallels being drawn with default and countries like Sri Lanka as well. And so we've heard once more from the finance minister, this is not something that is the concern that Pakistan should have, but the institutions around the world and agencies have also raised alarms with reference to where the country is heading. So we'll talk more about that and explore further in detail what can possibly be done with regards to the budget and the IMF bailout program, and if not, what is Pakistan's plans for the next fiscal year. Our second segment is going to take a look at the foreign policy of the country, another very important factor with regards to foreign relations and where the country stands, in a very important and precarious dynamic that the country has to put up a balancing act with is the dynamic that we have with the US and China. As the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs had earlier also spoken about how Pakistan has enjoyed deep historical ties with the US and how China has always been a very strong and strategic ally. Both countries' relationship is important to Pakistan and something that the country wants to go ahead with, and it does not support and is of course concerned and apprehensive of any world order that talks about two opposing blocs and a division of where the country stands today, and is something that is going to put Pakistan in an unfavorable strategic position. And this is important, especially in the way that the ties of both the countries with Pakistan have evolved over the years, and what sort of a situation that currently exists and how Pakistan will be able to uphold these relationships further. The minister also spoke about how the US may be unnecessarily fearful about losing its position or supremacy in the world, and that there is a lot of ways in which the principles and the values values of the West hold true in the global world, and how this is something that perhaps is being underestimated. At the same time, of course, Pakistan's role is important with reference to countries like Afghanistan as well, where the minister spoke about how perhaps the U.S. policy is in fact backfiring, and the issues with reference to the Taliban are increasing crime and a humanitarian crisis within the country, that Pakistan is approaching the issue with a much more holistic approach, and that there will be absolutely no allowance of any other military presence within the country to be able to go ahead with any sort of security within Pakistan is something that the country will not allow. But we'll explore that in further detail and see what Pakistan can do in this regard and the challenges that are ahead for the country. For this and more, as always, I've been joined all the way from Quetta by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi. Thank you, Farrukh, for joining us and being part of the debate. As always, we've also been joined for our first segment regarding the economic situation of the country by Dr. Aqdas, who's a senior economist. Thank you very much, Dr. Aqdas Afzal, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. And I'll start with you with reference to what is happening. There are a lot of concerns that the country, of course, has with reference to the bailout program. We earlier have been talking about how this is something that is absolutely necessary, absolutely vital for the country to progress, and a lot of our bilateral engagements also have been dependent upon this. And now that we're so close to the date of expiry of this program, and the hopes are diminishing in terms of whether or not Pakistan will be able to secure anything out of this bailout program at the moment, what do you think are the very serious or valid available options for Pakistan right now, especially with reference to the kind of flags that have been raised by the IMF at the moment with the budget?
Thank you very much for having me on the show. I think first thing that I want to say is about the ongoing negotiations between Pakistan and the IMF. And the first thing I want to say is I want to thank the finance minister and his team for the hard work that they have done for Pakistan. And I know it has not been easy for them, because the IMF, in my opinion, has been consistently changing goalposts for the last 1 year. I mean, first they asked Pakistan to cough up a primary surplus, which was very surprising, because I would like to remind the audience that Pakistan is a country that has gone through once in a generation super flood last year, that according to the estimations of international financial institutions like the World Bank, cost the Pakistani society and economy about damages worth $30 billion. So given that, Pakistan was asked to cough up a primary surplus, and Pakistan duly was able to show that to the IMF. Then there was this idea that Pakistan needed to show external financing of about $6 to $7 billion, which was very surprising, because if Pakistan is only going to have a current account deficit of about $5 billion, then why is Pakistan being consistently asked to show external financing for $6 to $7 billion? Okay, so we were able to do that again. But now I think the IMF has really overextended itself. And I don't know if anybody is going to pick up on this, or I really hope that they do pick up on this, because earlier we had a representative from the IMF saying something or commenting about Pakistan's internal political situation. I would like to remind you and the audience that this is not the IMF's mandate to comment about a country's internal political situation. And so I think there was something was said. I mean, a response was given. But now I see something very interesting happening. The recent response that I have received from, or at least not I have received, but at least the one that I've seen that is attributed to the country head of the IMF, Esther Ruiz. The IMF is now making a comment about, excuse me?
Yes, continue.
Okay, so the IMF is now making a comment about three main things. Number one, they're not happy with the amnesty scheme. Okay, we understand that there are issues connected to potential money laundering and that it sets a bad precedent. We can talk about that. But then they comment about the fact that the way the taxation measures have been taken by in the Pakistani budget are not progressive enough, and that some of the money could have been diverted to BISP. I would like to remind the audience and anybody watching from the IMF, this is not the IMF's mandate to be telling Pakistan what kind of a progressive or retrogressive taxation policy we are going to have. This is purely the mandate of the democratically elected government of Pakistan. The only thing the IMF should be concerned with is whether Pakistan is showing a primary surplus or not. So I think I see um, a constant exceeding of the mandate by the IMF. So I don't know what is driving this. So this is where I am getting this feeling that there are forces at play um, uh, other than the ones that we are looking at. So there is more than what meets the eye. And this is where the idea of this geopolitical dimension comes in, because there are certain professors and analysts based primarily in the USA who have now been saying that it would be better for Pakistan to default and then recover. So I think some of that thinking has percolated within the minds of the IMF staff. And I think what they are now asking Pakistan, number one, they are exceeding their mandate. This is not something that they should be telling Pakistan. And this is the last thing I want to say, and this is very important and a serious thing I'm about to say. I was speaking to an um, retired foreign secretary of Pakistan a couple of weeks ago and I'm not at liberty to share their name,
Okay.
when Nathan Porter made a statement about the internal political situation of Pakistan. Pakistan was very seriously thinking about, or at least I was given this impression that there was this idea that the foreign policy establishment was very angry at this statement, and they were seriously thinking about, a very serious response to this statement. So, this is not just an economic give and take that is going on. There is definitely geopolitical situation at play, and I really hope that in all of this craziness and chaos, the IMF can find uh, the time to award Pakistan or to successfully finish the ninth review, because Pakistan is a country that has gone through some very harrowing climate related destruction in the last 1 year. So, as far as optics are concerned, it doesn't look really good for the IMF or for the World Bank that, where on the one hand, they talk about helping countries who are suffering from climate related disasters. And while on the other hand, they are making these completely unreasonable, undemocratic demands on a democratically elected government of a country in the global south.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Dr. Aqdas, I also want to explore a little bit further what you said with regards to the tax amnesty scheme and the broadening of the tax base. And I understand you're saying that's beyond the mandate, but I want to understand this a little bit more in terms of what the IMF requires with regards to any country in terms of ensuring that that they're able to pay back whatever it is that the IMF actually lends them, and then set sort of a direction in terms of where the country is heading. And I want to understand if you can explain it to me and our viewers, how will the ability of a country to be able to decide on whatever sort of tax reforms that they want to put in, or a revenue generation that they want to decide on, is not in contradiction with what the IMF wants to see in terms of repayments or a direction?
Look, the formula or the conditions that the IMF lays down in front of countries like Pakistan, which unfortunately have to go to the IMF, because it's not just Pakistan that has to go to the IMF. If you look at South Asia right now, as we speak, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka in this region are right now, they have successfully entered into an extended fund facility with the IMF. Sri
Mm.
Lanka, we all know, wasn't doing very well. But Bangladesh was doing very well. And examples are quoted here in Pakistan of how Bangladesh is doing so well. So countries have to go to the IMF off and on in order to stabilize, especially if they go through a balance of payments crisis, which is what Pakistan went through in the last 1 year, primarily because of hostilities between Russia and Ukraine. And the ask is very simple. It's basically Washington consensus, depoliticization, liberalizing the economy, and privatization. This is the ask, and this is again the ask that has been uh, put on the table in front of Pakistan. But I would also like to say the following, that the IMF does not have the mandate and does not really understand um, the unique political economy that operates within certain countries, especially Pakistan. And so I think the IMF should be very careful when they're asking Pakistan to change the progressive or retrogressive nature of taxation measures. This is not what the IMF is mandated to do, and they shouldn't be doing it. So I'm at a loss here as to why the IMF is actually making this demand. It could be
All
that
right.
this could be a ploy to delay uh, the. I'm just thinking out loud. I mean, it could be one reason, one way of saying no. I really hope that it isn't. But what they are doing is, they're exceeding their mandate, really.
Right. Right, I understand. Farrukh, with reference to, of course, how we've seen the negotiations take place for quite some time, there have been things that we've identified that perhaps could have been better at Pakistan's, and there are things we have identified in terms of what the IMF is doing or the kind of factors that are contributing to why these negotiations aren't really putting us in a situation where we can actually see the bailout program materializing. But as of now and where we stand today, and the way that things are moving forward, as we were talking to Dr. Aqdas as well, do you think that currently this idea of moving forward with one board meeting or the ninth review, and then supporting Pakistan with reference to whatever obligations exist with the budget is something that the IMF is taking a look at seriously, and that the way that our team and the IMF are negotiating may possibly lead to something, or it's just a matter of time in another 2 weeks that we will not see the IMF program? And also add to that, please, what earlier was also referred to regarding how certain quarters are saying that perhaps it's better for Pakistan to default and then recover. I want to understand in a broader general term how that is beneficial for any country, or in what situation is that good for a country to be able to default and then recover.
Right, Sana, thank you very much for having me. Regarding your first question, I wanted to actually go back to Aqdas statement, where he has actually talked about geopolitics or possible influence of geopolitics here. And my take on that is, of course, there's geopolitics. IMF is seldom involved without any geopolitics. But this is not today's news. Remember when it started, when PTI actually took over, at that time, the word got out that the caretaker setup of that time had negotiated a big package with IMF, and that news somehow got leaked to the press. And immediately after that, what we saw was Mike Pompeo actually coming on air and telling IMF on record that IMF don't let American taxpayers' money go to China through Pakistan. And after that, we saw incredible scene that a chief economist whose tenure was still there, he was supposed to be around for 1.5 years, suddenly it resigned. An Indian origin economist was placed as the chief economist. And she was the one who actually structured the entire deal, and eventually we saw what happened. But my take on this, Sana, is that if there is some kind of conspiracy to keep on pushing Pakistan towards a wall, what are we doing about it? Let me just refresh the memory of all your viewers. Asad Umar was the first finance minister when we actually went to finance ministry. Then Hafiz Sheikh actually came. Hamad Azhar was there as a flash in the pan for a bit. And then we saw Jahangir Tareen, Shaukat Tareen. After that, then the government changed, and we saw Miftah Ismail, and eventually Ishaq Dar. So within the span of 4 years or 5 years, we have seen so many people changing the post. And that is not all. Our policies have been actually dwindling as a result. And then Ishaq Dar Saab has his own, a baggage or his background as well. So that also complicates the situation, especially regarding dollar's valuation. Now negotiations, I'm sure, are going on, but yesterday's statement that came from IMF is not very encouraging, because we clearly see that they have their objections on not one but many items in the budget, right? Regarding TextNet, I think that I could actually make peace with that. because that is a concern that I've also been raising here, that we should have been able to expand the tax base, especially tax the sacred cows like property market in the country. But regardless of that, where I'm not clear is the comment about amnesty scheme. An amnesty scheme, particularly because they haven't actually identified which one are they talking about. Was it about the amnesty scheme for the investment again in property by the expatriates or something else? So I wish IMF could be clearer in actually its criticism. So we should have known which are the sticking points, yes, the sticky points. So regardless of that, I'm not that hopeful. But there are three things that actually stand out when you look at the statements by Aqdas Saab. The first one is he has repeatedly told us that Pakistan is not going to default. Then this comment that there is a conspiracy or there is geopolitics to push Pakistan to default. Again, one would have, if I were a very paranoid person, I would have thought that if things don't actually get better, he can always blame it on a conspiracy and say that that's why we have, gotten bankrupted. But then he added with another statement, and he says that on 30th of June we are going to hear some great news. So I don't know what he is actually referring to, whether it is IMF's negotiation or something else. But at this moment, Sana, where we stand, I am not actually too optimistic about a deal. I hope to be proven wrong, but the problem once again is that the kind of policy mess we are in, especially the one that I pointed out yesterday to you, that our fiscal policy tries to go for some kind of growth, pro-growth policies. On the other side, our monetary policy is essentially against the idea of growth at this moment. A policy rate at 21% is something that will never allow any kind of economic movement in coming days. So this is the state of affairs right now. Regarding, default, whether it is a good option. With due respect, I think anybody who keeps on telling you that the country even has an option to default is kidding with you. Because, it is all about your own ability to make policy. It is about your own proactivity. If you actually default, that means that eventually you lose proactivity and you lose control. So I'm not very confident about this thing, that anybody who actually tells you that Pakistan should somehow default is helping the country at all.
Right. Dr. Aqdas, there is the factor when we talk about whether or not the US can actually bring forward any support. We've seen that recently a congressman also talked about this with regards to the Biden administration extending support to the country, but then the US secretary made a statement in which it didn't seem that they're going to play much role. But with regards to the kind of geopolitical factors that may be at play, do you think that possibly there could be some influence that Pakistan can try for, or the US can actually play with regards to where we stand today? And then also add to that, since I know you have a short time, with reference to where we talk about what Pakistan can possibly do better, the finance minister keeps on talking about how the laws regarding the state bank needs to be amended, and there is a few changes that have been done, but there's more that can happen or possibly should happen. What else do you think, and also comment on these laws and what needs to be done, but what else do you think that Pakistan could possibly do better even now in terms of increasing the possibility of us gaining any sort of advantage with the IMF?
Okay, thank you for that question. I think first thing that I want to say is that I have seen a lot of people in Pakistan in the media with their knives out when it comes to the mentioning the name of the finance minister. I think we could have our differences with the way the economy has been run under his ministership. But seriously, this is not the time to be criticizing the finance minister, because we are still in the middle of some very tough negotiations with an external international financial institution. So this is the time to support our own people. That's number one. I mean, we we can do a post-mortem analysis of what went wrong after June 30th. So having said this, I think I'm still hopeful that Pakistan is going to be able to successfully finish the ninth review, and I still stand by my statement that what the IMF is asking Pakistan in terms of how progressive the Pakistani tax plan is completely the IMF exceeding its mandate. It is not the IMF's business to be telling Pakistan what is the nature of um, how progressive the taxing plan is. I mean, Pitafi Saab can certainly tell us he's a citizen of this country, he pays taxes, but not the IMF. So I think we need to be very clear about that. And if the IMF insists on doing this, then this would be taken um, as foreign entity meddling in Pakistan's domestic policy,
Okay.
which is not permissible. So just to recap, I think this is the time to support our finance team. I think they have uh, there have been some missteps, okay, but I think they have been working very hard, and I'm still hopeful that the ninth review is going to be successful. And um, once we are past June 30th, based on the outcome of what happens on June 30th, where we stand, I think that would be the time to then conduct a post-mortem analysis of, whether the performance of the finance minister has been good or bad.
Right, and Dr. Aqdas, regarding the laws with reference to the state bank that the minister also refers to, do you think that the government can possibly do something in this regard? Because he also speaks about how there needs to be more changes in this regard.
Which particular law are you talking about? Sorry.
So with the state bank, of course, there have been policies coming in from the previous regime that the finance minister keeps on referring to, and what when we talk about the way that this is causing issues with reference to the industry, and then with the monetary policy as well, as of course a decision the government has had to take. But yes, you are you saying
I
something?
think I think my focus right now, my attention right now is squarely on these negotiations, and I just don't want to comment on the IMF sponsored um, legislation that was brought about in order to bring independence or state bank independence. I don't want to comment on that right now. I just want to focus my attention on the ongoing negotiations, and I would just like to wish the finance team best of luck for the ongoing negotiations, and hopefully we'll be able to successfully finish the ninth review.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Aqdas, for your time and for being part of the show. Farrukh, when we take a look at the situation, it's important also, and we were talking about how the finance minister also refers to what has happened in the past, especially with reference to the previous regime, and the kind of perhaps the way that they have dealt with negotiations with the IMF for the problems that have been created, also with the state bank. But when we take a look of the situation at the moment, of course, there needs to be a direction or a plan B as to what is going to happen after the 30th of June. Maybe we don't have time to wait till the 30th to sort of reflect upon what could have possibly be could have done better. What is it that the government can do today in order to move forward, not just with the IMF, but also in terms of ensuring that the fiscal year and the next year that Pakistan, of course, has to pay external debts or manage the economy is at least moving in the direction that the country can progress?
Right, Sana, regarding what happens after June 30th is something that is very important, and we have to actually keep on focusing on that. I will, but briefly, because I lost contact with you a little while ago, I couldn't hear what exactly was Dr. Das talking about when he was saying not attacking the finance minister. I might actually surmise from that he might have, to be talking with this impression that somehow I was criticizing the finance minister. That is not true. When it comes to personal relations or interactions with the finance minister, I've always had an excellent rapport with the man, and I think that he has been for his own office, not today, but every time he was finance minister, he has been very kind and very supportive when it came to personal interactions, right? But what I'm actually trying to unpack is the ridiculous, financial mess we are in. And that is, of course, not making of one man on or one policymaker. I think whatever you have to look at is for that to actually understand, you have to go back 6 years and audit the past 6.5 years. What exactly were the unfortunate policies choices that we have been making, and the way we have tried to actually do many things simultaneously or opposite things, and we ended up actually getting thrashed 100 times and eating onions 100 times as well. Right now, my concern is that the country doesn't default. Yeah, one small criticism for the finance minister would be that he keeps on referring to the economics of 2017-18. I think after Donald Trump, the world economy has totally changed direction. And now we'll have to actually live with the new dynamics, and for that we'll have to actually try to, be the, conspirators at their own game. How? If IMF actually, asks us to jump, we actually ask how high, and we start cooperating to the extent that it becomes impossible for them to say no. But that doesn't seem to be happening for past 8 months. So this is my concern right now, Sana.
Right.
But regarding what happens after June 30th, I think if we don't, get the, this program concluded, we will be in tough times, right? Very in thick soup, in very thick soup.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much for that, Farrukh. When we talk about, of course, the situation that the country is going through, there is the economic challenges, but there's also what is going on politically, and then, of course, our relationship with other countries as well. And so our foreign policy and our relations with other countries are also very important. And Pakistan is trying to put up a balancing act and make sure that all of its individual relationships with countries are, in fact, strengthened. And we move forward in terms of talking about how this can be increased in the benefits that Pakistan can get out of any relationship that it has with any other country. But it's important also in terms of how the international dynamics play their own role in this. And we know that the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs has spoken about what Pakistan values in terms of its relationship with both the US and China, and how both are strategically and is historically important for the country. But moving forward, what sort of challenges lay ahead is something we'll explore further in the second segment. We've been joined by Dr. Jamil Khan, who's a former ambassador. Thank you very much, Dr. Jamil, for being part of the discussion. We know, of course, that this has been something that is spoken about quite often, and there seems to be perhaps serious considerations coming in from the US in terms of where we stand or how the relationship is being perceived at. Of course, Pakistan has spoken about and quite explicitly talked about the importance of the relationship and the value that it holds with both the US and China. But the Minister of State spoke about an interesting thing with reference to the US in terms of how it may be unnecessarily fearful regarding issues with China. I want to understand how that translates into what the US perceives to be the role that Pakistan can play in this dynamic, and whether or not the relationship that Pakistan enjoys with China can eventually become a thorn in the relationship with the US, and that the balancing act may eventually become very difficult for the country.
You asking
Right,
me a question?
yes, Dr. Jamil.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, eventually, the way the geopolitical situation is emerging in this entire region, eventually, and of course, we have to bear in mind our geographical location. And this geographical location by itself, once we talk, why it becomes significant is that US foreign policy, number one priority of the foreign policy is containment of China. Amongst others, the BRI is one of the major economic threat, can translate into a threat later on. So BRI last ship segment. Of course, BRI is air and sea everything, but the last segment is CPAC. And CPAC is an advantage to China to avoid the vulnerability in the Indian Ocean right up to state of Malacca. And as we understand that very recently, just 1.5 years ago, US, UK, and Australia have entered into a defense agreement, and they have nuclearized these waterways. And China, about 90% of its all goods and services, and particularly oil, it goes through this region. So, United States want to have its supremacy of controlling things on the waterways and passages. Once that vulnerability is reduced through the PRI and its last segment, which is CPAC, then obviously China would definitely have an edge. While we are discussing that, we should also bear in mind that China, although this budget, the defense budget is much lower as compared to US. US has $700 billion, whereas China is less than 100 billion. But China and Russia together, that is what is the worry of US. China and Russia together, they are now competing with United States. And remember, in order to protect your economic interest or economic supremacy, one has to back it up with a military supremacy. So that military supremacy, which United States has as a unipolar world unipolar polar power, that is receding. And once that is receding, the window for that entire competition and culmination of that competition, and that is what our worry is, and that's what the Minister of State for Affairs has mentioned. And that window is really closing down a lot. And what is that window? Basically, China, with the collaboration of Russia, it's going to come almost parallel to the military power also of United States. So once that happens, on one side, economic power, China is number one country in terms of manufacturing since 2010. China is number one country in terms of trading since 2013. China has $17.6 trillion economy, and it definitely is a worry for the United States. China is taking a lead in all these fields, and China will then emerge as number one country, and China, Russia together can become the world most important and most powerful country. We also have to bear in mind that China and Russia together have gained almost an edge with the United States in the space. And any future domination, military domination to protect the economic interest, mostly that would revolve around who is more powerful in the space. While we are on this point, we should also have in our mind that Pakistan, because of its geographical location, Pakistan is in a very difficult situation. And sooner or later, Pakistan would have to take a side. Not at this stage. Maybe that transition may take some time, but the way things are emerging. Here, we must mention that China is our strategic partner. We have a very smooth relation with China. China, besides economic interest and the way China is increasing its economic interest in our country and in this region as a part of BRI, and BRI is $4 trillion project. 1 trillion has been spent, remaining 3 trillion is yet to be spent. Besides that, Gwadar is the main bone of contention with India, which is the watchdog of United States now. The Gwadar is one point which you might have noticed that there is so much of proxy war. India has directed about almost $800 million it's spending in the in the proxy war and in the intelligence activities in Balochistan and other parts. Why they are doing it? Why Indians are doing it? A, that they are the partner of US. B, that they want to sabotage CPAC. Now CPAC, Pakistan has its own interest. While I have discussed all these points for your viewer, I must also mention that at this stage, the way we are having our economic vulnerability, and it is just becoming intolerable for the entire nation because of its impact on the majority of the population. That by itself is a huge concern. And at this stage, my own analysis is that China has to take some burden of if IMF totally the way Mr. Dar is saying, and I agree with him that IMF is now working under the umbrella of geopolitical situation, and that means under the influence. That means the IMF has more directors of one particular country, which is United States. So those directors can always influence IMF, and they've been doing that. Besides that, there is a manual of United States, and that manual, military manual, which says that in order to gain the foreign policy goals, uh, the financial institutions like World Bank and IMF and other financial institutions, they could be made best use of it, and they've been doing it. They've been making use of it. So Mr. Dar, although he's being criticized for that, but there I would support him that he has envisaged it very correctly. That
Right.
yes, there is a geopolitical effect. Yes.
Right, Dr. Jamil, I just wanted to clarify that you said that China may be able to step up or would have to step up. Can you clarify whether or not China will be able to play a role in this regard, or will be even willing to play a role with regards to where we stand with the IMF to counter influences such as what you're speaking of?
Well, I think let me put it in a very straight manner, perhaps crude manner. We have to evaluate that China, of course, is our friend, but in the international affairs, no one is your friend or enemy. It's the interest which clashes. So Chinese huge interest is now because of the CPEC and because of Pakistan geographical location, what I have said. So once they are spending $4 trillion in their BRI, and if that is sabotaged because of this region, then in that case they'll have to perhaps think about it twice. And my own analysis is that China, the way things are developing, see the way the shell company is winding up, the way Russian oil first tanker has arrived here, the way Azerbaijan has committed today with the prime minister to say to give you the LNG. So all these factors, if we combine together, and the advancement in SCO, the advancement in ECO. So these factors, if we keep on our mind, then China in its own interest, and of course we have our strategic relations with it, with China, but China in its own interest to preserve its string of pearls and to preserve its BRI, I don't want to say it would have no choice, but it would definitely like to
Right, absolutely.
step up its
Absolutely, Dr. Jamil.
further
I'll go
support.
quickly to Farrukh as well. Farrukh, the conversation with the minister also spoke about how Pakistan would be in an unfavorable spot or would be threatened by any idea of the world order splitting into two different blocks. And we've spoken about whether or not there is a change that is coming in the world order. Will we possibly see a different one? And you've talked about that often in the past as well. But I want to take your opinion on whether or not that may be a possibility or something that the country needs to think about.
All right, Sana. Actually, I was intrigued by this interview. As I already know that you and I both are members of Hinata Panikar Admiration Club. So I was, for a moment I thought that there were too many details in the interview, right? Then I had to actually go through the entire thing and realize that the source to which it was given also might have actually, structured it that way. So Hinara Banikar, what she was saying, I in principle agree with her, and I've been actually agitating the same point that we don't have the luxury of choice, right? And we have to both these relationships have been very rewarding to Pakistan. China and Pakistan are the closest allies. Pakistan and America have been the longest allies, and oh my God, where would have been without these relations, right? So I really cherish both these relations. My concern right now is that all this talk about changes in the world order, this decoupling that I've also been focusing on for quite some time, they are they are not policy as yet. They are essentially lobbying from various disparate forces. For example, India has a huge component that keeps on lobbying that the US should actually take a stance against China. Similarly, Japan also, again, I'm in love with both China and Japan. But the problem is that they also want to have a world order where situation is going to be very different. Australia keeps on lobbying as well. By the way, just to clarify one point that Ambassador Savas made, he said that nuclearization of these waters. My understanding is that these frigates that have been actually ordered through AUKUS, they are nuclear powered, they are not nuclear capable. So that won't be actually a nuclearization of these waters. That would only mean that the vehicles that are there, they are going to actually continue to work without any hitch, because diesel propelled frigates actually create problem. You have to have incredible amount of diesel on board to actually keep on going. But having said that, regarding the world order at this moment, Sana, all this talk about pearl of strings, string of pearls, or for that matter Malacca and all, the problem with that is that we are looking at a flat map of Earth, two-dimensional map, right? There are three dimensions, of course. You have to actually look at the space and the technology advancement through which things can be flown from one point to another. So I don't think that I agree with everyone that the old world order that emerged after the collapse of the USSR is definitely declining. But does that mean that we are going for a new Cold War or a bipolar or multipolar world is still to be seen. I think that the IR experts have been wrong consistently on everything. So I am not going to hold my breath and think that there is going to be decoupling per se, which I think is impossible. I think at this moment the best course of action for us to is not to talk about our vulnerability because of this choice, but keep on going with both relationships and actually put in an effort to actually woo both of them.
Right. Thank you very much, Farrukh Pitafi, and thank you very much, Dr. Jamil Khan, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. That's all that we have time for, and we'll see you tomorrow.